Hello everybody, I'm Elena Zaffaroni. I'm Italian, I'm a video game translator and tester. I started working in this field in 2008, and I'm also a Lingonerd. And today I'm here to talk with you about figs. After this small introduction, you probably have two questions. What is a Lingonerd and what do figs have to do with gaming? All right, so we'll start with figs. Not only delicious fruits, this word also stands for French, Italian, German, and Spanish, which, aside from English, are the four most widely used languages in the European market. And if we translate this into players, we are talking about 125 million individuals. A Lingonerd is one of us, a network of video game enthusiasts and localization specialists with over 10 years of experience in game translation, testing, and project management. But as you will notice from our slides, we are absolutely not graphic experts. Please do not come to us for design stuff. It is an honor to take part in the Wheel of Game conference today and to be able to explain a bit about the importance of game localization in a linguistically complex market such as the European one. All right, let's take a step back. I mentioned localization during my introduction, so please let me explain first what localization is. All right, what? Localization is not just translation. It is the adjusting of a product, in this case a video game, to a local market through the adaptation of graphics, date and hour formats, currencies, cultural references, pop culture, and many other details. Localization is also about adapting the game for different anagraphic targets for a specific audience that include men and women, but I will get back to the gender issue later. I would like now to move to the why. Now that we've seen what localization is, let's discuss why it is important. First of all, the experience. A localized product is something that really speaks your language, that is adapted to your culture, and that provides a more immersive and welcoming experience. Like this slide, everyone loves to be greeted in their own language, right? In the context of a video game, we'd also want all the currencies in the shop to be correct for the market where the players are going to make their purchase. And if you have, for example, a global event which ends at a specific time, you would want the time format and the time zone to be localized so that it's clearer for the players what time the event is actually ending. But secondly, let's talk about revenues. Here in this slide, we have the top 10 countries by game revenues. And as you can see, first of all, localization allows you to reach an incredibly wider audience, especially in countries where English is not commonly spoken. But you might also notice that the only European languages included in the top 10, apart from English, are exactly French, Italian, German, and Spanish, our figs. In this other slide, we can see the gaming revenue by population, and we can see that we have about 30 million players for France, 25 for Italy, over 40 for Germany, and another 25 for Spain. Not bad, huh? But now let's move to when. When should localization happen in your development process? It is vital to quality that localization starts in pre-production phase, while it's now usually introduced in post-production. So ideally, the localization team should be included in the production phase to monitor visual assets, storyline, character descriptions, and so forth, in order to evaluate if everything is well suited for localization. I'm going to give you some practical examples. Let's start with the cultural check. And I'd like to give you a specific example. that that specifically happened to us. The screenshot you see here is taken from a game that we worked on a few years ago. We performed not only translation, but also linguistic testing, which is a very important stage of localization. During testing, our German language specialist noticed that one of the main characters, a former army member, was wearing black combat boots with white laces, as you can see here. And she immediately reported that this exact combination, black boots and white laces, in Germany is related to white supremacy groups. This would clearly cause a problem in the local market. So, as you can see, localization is something that this is something that can be spotted only by a local. The localization team suggested that the developers change the color of the laces to a different one to fix the issues. Let's move to file management. This is a step where you can check that the text files contain the information needed for localization, like who's the speaker, what's the gender of the speaker, are there string IDs, are there context notes, everything that is important to know when you are translating. Another example is source text evaluation, when you can evaluate if the text draft should be tweaked for localization. For example, are there going to be in your text placeholders and tags? Another example are text boxes. So it's very important to check that text boxes are large enough to fit the text, in case the implementation of dynamic boxes isn't an option, or in case there is limited space. You don't want the text to go out of your text boxes, right? Similarly to this, we have string length, which is to define any potential string length challenges and determine restrictions, if they need to be, and how much. This is particularly important for UI text. Another check that needs to be done is the font check, to check that the font you selected for your game is fully readable in all languages you are intending to localize into. And similar to font check, there is the character set check. Does the font you chose contain all the necessary glyphs, all the necessary special characters that can be included in the languages you want to localize into? And then we have language support. Does your engine support RTL, which are the right to left languages? We also have baked in text. This is when you have text in images or videos, and maybe you need to localize them because they're important for the storyboard. In that case, do these texts need a special handling during production? One final example is marketing. You could find potential anchor points for each local market that the marketing team could latch onto, and you need a local to tell you if those anchor points are there. All these examples that I gave you should be discussed in pre-production, because any issues that you can catch earlier will reduce the need for QA and for additional production time, eventually leading to save money, obviously. Now that we have talked about getting your game prepared for localization, I would like to get back to FIX. So the main block of European languages that you might consider localizing into. And we have talked about the fact that this means a market of 125 million players. We've talked about why it's important to put the localization in the hands of professionals that can do much more than simply translating. But let's think about how profitable it is to localize into FIX. So these 4 countries are ranked in the global top 10 for game revenues, but each country and language has, of course, its peculiarities. French, for example, is a more formal language than the others, while players are usually addressed with vous, which is the formal version of you. Italian uses a series of special characters like E, A, U, and O with accent. German is renowned for having the longest word in the world, and is in general about 30% longer than English. And finally, Spain, which has a specific gender for nouns, adjectives, articles, and pretty much everything. But guess what? These issues are actually present in all of the 4 languages. But I would like now to focus on one of these issues specifically, which is what I mentioned for Spanish, the gender. Let's take as an example the golden armor, an element that you might have in games quite often. So here we have an example with Spanish, armadura dorada. So when the noun armadura is female, like in this case, the adjective golden needs to change and be female as well to agree with the name. You cannot just have a segment saying golden for all of your elements. You will need it to be adapted depending on the name. But guess what? The same is valid for all the 3 languages, all the other 3 languages. So all figs have armor as a female word requiring a female adjective. See how it works. And this is kind of funny, maybe, that armor is a female word, since female characters hardly wear any compared to the male counterparts. As you might know, please take a look at this nice gallery that we've put together to show you, as probably women have a thicker skin than men. My favorite is the middle one. This is just a funny example to introduce the fact that, as you can see, it's not only a grammar problem, it's also a cultural problem that needs to be taken into account when localizing into figs. There are several studies showing how gender prejudice is more common in languages with grammatical genders, leading speakers to feel differently about women versus men. Talking about the host country, Finland, which has a non-gendered language like English, here we have a very good example of gender stereotypes. You might have seen this image taken from Twitter, which shows how Google Translate as a clear gender bias when translating. This conference, We Love Games, focuses on women in games and tech development. And Women in Games is an association that also promotes equality and diversity in games. Video games are played by millions of people over the world, especially young people, children, teenagers, the adults of tomorrow. And we, the people that work in the gaming industry at different levels, can all do our part to fight against the underrepresentation of women. I am going to speak for the field that I work on, localization. We strongly believe that language shapes and influences society. So an efficient and professional translation team will be able to guide developers through the issues caused by translating a non-gendered language into a gendered one. I would like to give you some examples. It is possible, for example, to create gender tags that can be applied depending on the gender needed in a sentence. It is possible to create a duploc, which is a duplicate file of the game text, in case a female character is selected instead of male. But we also see the emergence of the third gender and the need for a non-binary solution, and this is why we encourage the devs to think of multiple loc files. Another idea is providing the localization team with all possible assets before they start working, such as character bibles and dialogue scripts that show who the speaker is and who he or she is talking to. It's also advisable to have a discussion between devs, writers, and localization team in early stages to identify the needs for separate strings, even before implementing dialogues in the game. And these are just a few examples, but as you'll notice, it would be more beneficial if this is all discussed in pre-production, like I mentioned before. It is our personal commitment not only to translate a game so that the players in our countries will enjoy the best experience possible, but also to strive for the most inclusive language in games and to guide developers as much as we can towards games that allow inclusive language. And now I'm really curious to hear from you. I'm looking forward to your questions. For example, what sort of gender-related issues have you come across when localizing your games? Or what would be your hesitation in localizing your game? And anything else you might want to ask me. To close my presentation, I would like to invite you to write to us if you would like to have our recipe booklet with recipes for figs. Thank you very much, everybody. And this is all for me.